Hey guys, Pastor Marc again. Last night at First Baptist Church, we closed up the book of 1 Samuel, and I kind of hated ending on chapter 31 because it leaves on kind of a really sour note. It's about King Saul. So it goes through and basically it tells of the last battle of King Saul and really of his family. Now, God condemned him probably nearly 30 years before and said, you and your household, you're not going to take the throne of Israel. I'm taking it away from you and giving it to somebody else. And he gave it to David. And so King Saul has been a terrible leader. He's tried to kill David over and over, and he's killed all the priests. He killed like 80 priests. It was bad just because they helped David. His rage really got the best of him. So this starts off, this chapter starts off by saying that the Philistines came to attack, and then the men of Israel were actually running away. Being a soldier, that is a horrible thing to think about being such a being so afraid you would turn tail and run, and then the Philistines were killing them, as they're running away. That's just not the way any soldier wants to go out. So that first verse just starts off the chapter in a really bad way. The second verse says that then all of Saul's sons were killed, including Jonathan, who we come to love and adore as David's best friend. And then the archers got Saul, and he got a mortal wound. It was going to kill him. So he asked, and there was sometimes death would be easier than some of the horrible things that the enemy would do to you. So he asked his armor bearer, he's like, please kill me. And the armor bearer said, I can't do it. So he ends up putting his sword, thrusting himself on his sword. And I'll get to that. That's not necessarily a bad thing in just a minute. And his armor bearer also realized that he was also probably going to be run in, and for whatever reason, he killed himself also. Now, this sounds, horrible with suicide, but sometimes, who knows what kind of torture and horrible things that they would have done to King Saul. And when the Philistines did find him, they cut off his head, they took his body and his son's bodies, they took him to the pagan temple, and they nailed him to the wall. But then the cool thing is there is still honor in certain areas, and there should always be honor among us as Christians. There was a group of people who they said, when they heard about it, they said, we're going to go and we're going to change that. And so as much as we didn't like, they didn't say they didn't like King Saul, but he was God's anointed over Israel. So they went there probably under, fear that they could be killed themselves. They went there, they took the bodies off of the wall, they carried them back to their village, and then they burned them, they cremated them. And Jews don't necessarily generally do that, and it's possible their bodies were so mutilated that they felt like that was, they had to do that. So King Saul, did this, but as a warrior, it's just such a difficult way to go out, that for one, you see your armory turning tail and running and being killed. You see all of your sons die, and then you're mortally wounded. And these people, that's what they did to their bodies when they were already dead. God only knows what they would have done to him if they'd have found him living. And so he thrust himself on his own sword. And again, not the way a warrior wants to go out. And then you see the honor of some of these people who said, you know what, he was God's anointed, he was our king, we're going to take care of him and his family. Even if it costs us our lives, we're going to painstakingly do that. I can't imagine getting 4 bodies and then bringing them back to put them on a funeral pyre. But the saddest thing about King Saul is David had his problems. David had his sins. David had his times when he turned away from God. My last lesson was just saying David was in a place he shouldn't have been, doing things he shouldn't have necessarily been doing, and he did reap negative rewards for that, and that went on through his life. However, David always came back to God to repent. He always came back and left everything to God. When you read through the Psalms, you can read his heart. Saul had years and years and years and never turned back to God. He even turned back to sorcery, but he never turned back to God and said, God, I admit my fault and my defeat, and I need you, Lord. Psychologically or spiritually, it's all the same. We've got to admit what's going on in our lives. We can't let bitterness or anger, you have to admit what part you had in a problem that went on, what part you have in a sin that's going on in your life. If it's always somebody else's problem, it's always going to be your problem. Whatever's going on in your life, it may be bad, or you may just have a bad set of circumstances going on, but always turn back to the Lord. Don't be a King Saul who went out on such a sour note, and now David's going to take over the kingdom, which is not a bad thing, and it was prophesied, but nonetheless, always turn back to God. Always make sure that you seek Him out and be honest with Him and yourself about the part that you may have played in whatever's going on in your life. I'm Mark Lowe, and I need some coffee.